The wind had teeth that night, not the gentle bite of autumn's first frost, but the savage gnashing of a winter predator that had waited months to feed. It screamed across the Montana plains like a wounded animal driving snow horizontal, turning the world into a white void where earth and sky became indistinguishable. 12-year-old Ethan Barrett stood at the living room window of the farmhouse, his breath fogging the cold glass, watching his mother's taillights disappear into the gathering storm. The red glow faded within seconds, swallowed by the blizzard that meteorologists were calling the worst in 40 years. The storm of the century, they said. Ethan pressed his palm against the window, feeling the cold seep through, and wondered if maybe they were right. "Mom will be okay," he whispered to himself, to the empty house, to the howling wind. "She's driven in snow before. But not like this. Never like this." The call had come 90 minutes ago. County General Hospital activating emergency protocol. All essential staff report immediately. Grace Barrett, trauma nurse, had hesitated for maybe 5 seconds before kissing Ethan's forehead and grabbing her coat. In those 5 seconds, he'd seen the war in her eyes. Duty versus motherhood. The people who would die without her versus the son who needed her here. "I'll be back before you know it, baby," she'd said, but her voice had cracked on the word baby. The generators fueled, the firewood stacked. You know where everything is. "I'm not a baby anymore, Mom. I'm 12. Ethan had tried to sound brave, tried to sound like the man of the house, but his voice betrayed him, pitching higher than he wanted. "I can handle one night." Grace had cupped his face in her hands, her nurse's hands, that had held together more broken people than Ethan could count. "Your father would be so proud of the young man you're becoming. You're just like him. Smart, brave, too stubborn for your own good." Her smile had been bold and proud at the same time. "Lock the doors. Don't answer for anyone. The sheriff says there might be people taking advantage of the blackout." "I'll be fine. I know you will be. You're a Barrett. We're survivors." And then she was gone and Ethan was alone. The farmhouse had never seemed so large. Built by Ethan's great-grandfather in 1947, it sprawled across 3,000 square feet of solid timber and stone designed to withstand Montana's worst. But it wasn't the size that made it feel enormous tonight. It was the absence. 3 years ago, there had been 3 Barretts living here. Then the black ice and the oak tree and the closed casket funeral. Now there were 2. Tonight there was 1. Ethan moved through the house following the routine his mother had drilled into him. Check the windows, all sealed. Check the doors, front door locked, back door locked, basement door locked. Fill the bathtub with water in case the pipes freeze. Done. Bring in extra firewood from the covered porch. He made 4 trips, stacking split oak and pine next to the river stone fireplace that dominated the living room's west wall. His father had built that fireplace the summer before he died. Ethan could still see him shirt off in the July heat, carefully placing each stone, explaining how the flue worked, how to build a fire that would burn all night. Michael Barrett had been an aerospace engineer for Lockheed Martin, a man who understood physics and thermodynamics and structural integrity. He'd designed components for satellites and fighter jets, but his favorite projects had always been at home. The solar panel array on the barn roof, the water collection system, the backup generator with its neat rows of marine batteries. Just in case, Buddy, his father, would say whenever Ethan asked why they needed all this equipment, "A smart man prepares for disasters he hopes will never come." Ethan stood in the basement now, looking at his father's workbench. 3 years of dust covered the tools, but everything was exactly where Michael Barrett had left it. The batteries, 6 deep-cycle marine batteries wired to solar panels fully charged. The inverter with its tangle of color-coded wires. The diagrams taped to the wall in his father's precise engineering handwriting showing how to bypass the main electrical panel in an emergency. His father had known. Somehow he'd known. The lights flickered. Once, twice. Then died, plunging the basement into absolute darkness. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. He fumbled for the flashlight on his father's workbench, fingers shaking, knowing exactly where it should be because his father had always kept it in the same spot. His hand closed around cold metal. Click. The LED beam cut through the darkness and Ethan could breathe again. Upstairs, the generator should have kicked on automatically. Ethan counted to 30. Nothing. He climbed the basement stairs and checked the electrical panel. The generator's ready light was dark. He went to the mudroom where the access panel for the generator room stood open. The generator sat silent cold. "Come on," Ethan whispered, reaching for the manual start. "Please." He pulled the starter cord. Once. Nothing. Twice. The engine coughed but didn't catch. 3 times. 4. On the 5th pull, something inside the engine made a sound like grinding metal, and smoke began to seep from the housing. "No, no, no, no." Ethan killed the power switch and stepped back, watching the smoke curl up toward the ceiling. The generator was dead. Probably the starter motor, maybe the fuel injector. His father would have known. His father would have fixed it. But his father was 3 years in the ground, and Ethan was 12 years old and alone in a dying house with a blizzard trying to claw its way through the walls. The temperature was already dropping. Ethan could see his breath in the flashlight beam. Without the generator, there was no furnace, no heat pump, no electric baseboards. The house had the fireplace, and that was all. He built a fire the way his father had taught him. Crumpled newspaper at the base, kindling in a loose teepee, small logs, then larger ones. The match hissed to life, and Ethan touched it to the newspaper. Flames caught spread, grew. Within 10 minutes, he had a proper fire going, orange light dancing across the living room's wood-paneled walls. But a fireplace could only heat so much space. The bedrooms would be freezing. The kitchen was already cold. Ethan dragged blankets and pillows from his room and made a nest on the couch closest to the fireplace. He wrapped himself in layers, wool and down and fleece until he looked like a small, frightened burrito. The landline phone was dead. The cell tower had probably gone down with the first gust of wind. No power, no phone, no way to call for help. Ethan was truly isolated. He tried to sleep, but every sound made him jump. The wind shrieked around the eaves. Snow pelted the windows like thrown gravel. Something, maybe a tree branch, scraped against the side of the house with a sound like fingernails on wood. And underneath it all, a deeper sound. A rumble that Ethan felt more than heard. Engines. Ethan threw off the blankets and moved to the window. Through the swirling white chaos, he could see lights. Multiple lights weaving and bobbing along Highway 287 that ran past the Barrett property. Not car headlights, lower to the ground. Motorcycles. "What kind of idiot rides a motorcycle in a blizzard?" Ethan muttered. The kind who doesn't have a choice, apparently. As he watched the lead bike hit a patch of black ice, it went down hard, sliding across the road in a shower of sparks. The rider tumbled, rolled, came up on his knees. The second bike tried to avoid the first and lost control, high-siding its rider into a snowbank. The third, fourth, fifth, they all went down like dominoes, a catastrophic chain reaction of metal and leather and bad luck. Ethan counted. 20 motorcycles. 20 riders. All down, scattered across the highway and the ditches like discarded toys. They were trying to get up, but the wind knocked them down. They were trying to right their bikes, but the ice made it impossible. One rider collapsed and didn't move. Another crawled toward him on hands and knees. They were going to die out there. Ethan's mother's voice echoed in his head. "Don't answer for anyone. The sheriff says there might be people taking advantage of the blackout." But his father's voice was louder. "You help people when they need it. That's what separates us from animals. We have the capacity for compassion, and that capacity demands action." Ethan looked at the 20 figures struggling in the snow, struggling to survive. He looked at his warm house with its fire and its walls and its relative safety. He thought about what his father would do. Michael Barrett would have already been out the door. Ethan grabbed his father's old winter coat 3 sizes too big and pulled it on. He grabbed the industrial flashlight, the one with 1,000,000 candle power and batteries that could last for days. He unlocked the front door, and the wind nearly ripped it from his hands. The cold hit him like a physical blow, driving snow into his face hard enough to sting. He could barely see 3 feet ahead, but he raised the flashlight and began waving it in broad arcs, a beacon in the darkness, a lighthouse in the storm. "Here," he shouted, but the wind stole his voice. "Over here!" One of the figures turned toward the light, then another. They began moving toward the house, slowly fighting for every step. The first one to reach the porch was the biggest human being Ethan had ever seen. 6'6", at least 300 pounds of muscle and leather, with a gray-streaked beard full of ice and eyes like chips of blue glass. His leather vest, his cut, as Ethan would later learn to call it, bore patches and symbols. A skull wreathed in flames. Words in Gothic script, Ironclad Brotherhood MC, motorcycle club, biker gang, the exact kind of people his mother had warned him about. The big man stared down at Ethan, and for a long moment neither of them moved. Ethan's hand tightened on the flashlight, the only weapon he had. The big man's hands clenched and unclenched, trying to work feeling back into frozen fingers. "Kid," the man said finally, his voice like gravel in a cement mixer, "you got a death wish, or are you just the bravest little fool in Montana?" "You're freezing," Ethan said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "All of you, come inside." "You know who we are." Ethan looked past the big man at the others gathering on his lawn. 19 more bikers, all in leather and denim, all covered in snow and road rash, all looking like extras from a movie about the apocalypse. Tattoos covered every visible inch of skin. Garza mapped their faces. These were not nice people. These were not safe people. "I know you're going to die if you stay out here," Ethan said. "And I know my dad would have helped you. So I'm helping you." The big man studied him for what felt like an hour, but was probably only seconds. Then something shifted in his expression. Not softness, Wiley, but recognition. Respect, maybe. "What's your name, son?" "Ethan. Ethan Barrett." "I'm Walker. This is my club." He gestured to the others who were now gathered at the edge of the porch, watching this exchange with expressions Ethan couldn't read. "We come in, we don't cause trouble. We warm up, wait out the storm, then we're gone. That worked for you. That works for me." Walker nodded slowly, then turned to his men. "You heard the kid. Inside. Take off your boots. Show some respect." And just like that, 20 members of the Ironclad Brotherhood Motorcycle Club filed into Ethan Barrett's home, tracking snow and danger, and the promise of violence held carefully in check. The living room had never been meant to hold 20 people. It buckled under the invasion. Every surface suddenly occupied, every piece of furniture claimed. The bikers spread out with the efficiency of soldiers, which some of them probably were. They staked out territory, dropped their cuts on chairbacks, peeled off their frozen gloves, and tried to work feeling back into their hands. Ethan stood by the fireplace, his father's baseball bat gripped in both hands, trying not to look as terrified as he felt. 20 men, 20 strangers. Any one of them could have broken him in half without breathing hard. All of them together could have done anything they wanted, but they didn't. They sat quietly, respectfully, like guests in a church. Walker settled into the leather recliner that had been Michael Barrett's favorite chair, and something about seeing this scarred giant in his father's spot made Ethan's throat tighten. But Walker didn't sprawl. He sat carefully, as if he understood the chair was sacred space. "Where's your old man, Ethan?" "He died 3 years ago, car accident." The words came out flat automatic, the way they always did now. "Black ice. Went off the road into a tree." Walker's expression flickered. Pain, maybe, or recognition. "I'm sorry, son. That's a hard thing to carry." "I'm okay." "I'm sure you are. Your mama," this was the dangerous question. Ethan knew that if he said his mother was home, was just in another room, these men would probably be asked to speak with her. And when she didn't appear, they'd know he'd lied. But if he told the truth, if he admitted he was completely alone, the equation could change. His father had taught him that honesty was usually the best policy. But his father had also taught him that survival sometimes required tactical omissions. "She's a trauma nurse at County General. The hospital called in all essential staff. She's stuck there until the storm clears. And you're here alone." Not a question, a statement. Walker's eyes, those ice chip eyes, saw right through every possible lie. "I can take care of myself." "I can see that." Walker's mouth might have twitched toward a smile. 12 years old, facing down 20 bikers with a baseball bat. That takes either courage or stupidity. Haven't decided which yet. "Maybe both," Ethan admitted. This got genuine laughs from several of the bikers. The tension in the room eased like a rope that had been pulled taut, suddenly given slack. "How long's the power been out?" Walker asked. "About 2 hours. The generator died 90 minutes ago. It's going to get cold in here fast." Walker looked around at his men. "We got anyone who can fix a generator?" A lean biker with arms covered in motorcycle-themed tattoos raised his hand. "I can try. Used to be a diesel mechanic before I joined up." "That's Dakota," Walker said to Ethan. "Best wrench in the Brotherhood. And the ugly bastard next to him is Smoke. Between the two of them, they can fix anything with an engine." Smoke, who had a long scar running from his temple to his jaw, grinned. Kids, show us to your generator. Ethan led them to the mudroom, showed them the dead generator with its smoke-stained housing. Dakota and Smoke exchanged a look that Ethan had learned to recognize on mechanics' faces. It was the look that meant bad news and expensive repairs. Starter motor shot, Dakota confirmed, pulling the housing off to inspect the damage. Fuel injectors probably clogged too. This thing hasn't been serviced in years. My dad used to maintain it, Ethan said quietly. But since he died, Mom doesn't really know how. Dakota's expression softened. No shame in that, kid. These things are temperamental at best. He looked at Smoke. We're not fixing this without parts we don't have. What about the batteries? Ethan asked. Both men turned to look at him. My dad has 6 marine batteries in the garage hooked up to solar panels and an inverter. He used to tinker with off-grid power systems. Dakota's eyes lit up. Smart man, your old man. Show us. The garage was exactly as Michael Barrett had left it. The workbench with its organized tools. The pegboard with every wrench and screwdriver labeled and in place. The 6 deep cycle batteries sitting in their charging cradles connected to the solar array on the roof. The inverter with its bundle of color-coded cables. Your dad built all this? Smoke asked, running his hand over the workbench with something like reverence. Yeah, he was an aerospace engineer. He designed satellite components for Lockheed Martin. Ethan's voice cracked slightly, but he liked building things at home more. Said it reminded him why he got into engineering in the first place, to make life better for people he loved. Dakota and Smoke stood silent for a moment, paying respects to a man they'd never met but understood completely. We can work with this, Dakota said finally. We'll bypass the generator, run the inverter off the batteries, feed that into the furnace's control circuit. It won't power the whole house, but it'll give you heat. That works, Ethan said. Good. Now, normally I'd never do electrical work without proper permits and inspections. This is a temporary fix just to get you through the storm. When your mom gets back, you get a licensed electrician to check everything before using the regular system again. Promise me. I promise. All right then, let's get to work. For the next hour, Ethan received a crash course in emergency electrical systems from 2 biker mechanics who turned out to be surprisingly good teachers. They explained every step, showed him how to calculate the furnace's power draw, how to wire the batteries in series to increase voltage, how to create a safe bypass around the dead generator. Your dad left you gold here, Dakota said as they worked. This battery system, the solar charging, the inverter, this is top-shelf prep work. He was thinking ahead. He always said we needed to be ready for disasters we hoped would never come. Smart man, wish I'd met him. They connected the final wire. Dakota nodded to Smoke, who flipped the switch on the inverter. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then with a rumble that Ethan felt through the concrete floor, the furnace kicked on. Warm air began flowing through the vents. The bikers in the living room let out a cheer that rattled the windows. Ethan felt tears prick his eyes, hot and unexpected. His house was going to be warm. They were all going to be okay. Dakota clapped him on the shoulder, gentle but firm. You did good, kid. Your old man would be proud. They returned to the living room like conquering heroes. Walker stood and extended his hand to Ethan. Not a handshake for a child, but a real handshake, man to man, iron grip meeting iron grip. You saved our lives tonight, Ethan, Walker said with absolute seriousness. First by opening your door when you had every reason to lock it. Then by being smart enough and brave enough to help us help you. The ironclad Brotherhood doesn't forget debts. Ever. It was Dakota and Smoke who fixed the furnace, Ethan protested. With your father's equipment, your batteries, and your idea. Walker shook his head. Don't diminish what you did. Bravery is opening the door. Intelligence is knowing how to use what you have. You've got both, son. That's rare. The warmth spreading through the house did more than heat the air. It transformed the atmosphere. The bikers relaxed, sprawling more comfortably, their cuts spread out to dry by the fire. Someone found Ethan's PlayStation in the entertainment center. This thing work? Asked the massive biker Walker had earlier introduced as Garrett. 6'6", probably 320 pounds, with hands like dinner plates and surprisingly gentle eyes. Yeah, but we can't run the TV without more power, Ethan started. Smoke held up a portable monitor. Found this in your dad's workshop. It's 12 volt. We can run it straight off the battery system. Within minutes, Garrett and three other bikers were engaged in an intense racing game competition, trash-talking each other with the enthusiasm of teenagers. Their laughter filled the house warm and human and utterly unexpected. Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor watching these terrifying men play video games like kids and felt something unknot in his chest. This was going to be okay. They really weren't going to hurt him. Walker settled onto the floor beside him, moving with surprising grace for a man his size. "What time does your mom usually call?" "She said she'd try, but the phone lines are down. She's going to be worried sick." "She's probably too busy to worry. The hospital will be swamped with people hurt in the storm." Ethan picked at a loose thread on his jeans. "She's a really good nurse. She's saved a lot of people." "I'm sure she has. Takes a special kind of courage to run toward pain instead of away from it." Walker was quiet for a moment. "You said your dad passed 3 years ago. What happened?" Ethan had told this story 100 times, but it never got easier. Black ice, December 14th, 2021. He was coming home from work, took the curve on Miller Road too fast, lost control, went off the road into an oak tree. They said he died instantly. Mom says he didn't suffer. That's something, at least. "Is it? I used to think so, but now I don't know. Maybe suffering means you get to say goodbye. Maybe instant is just cruel." Ethan's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I never got to tell him I loved him one last time." Walker's hand settled on Ethan's shoulder, heavy and warm. He knew, son. Fathers always know. "Did you have kids?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Walker's hand tightened on Ethan's shoulder, then relaxed. When he spoke, his voice was rough with old pain. "A daughter, Lily. She'd be 13 now if she'd lived." Ethan turned to look at Walker, fully seeing the grief carved into the older man's face. "What happened?" "Leukemia. Diagnosed when she was 7, fought like a warrior for 3 years. I was in Afghanistan when she died. Air Force captain flying missions I can't talk about. She went into her final decline while I was on deployment. By the time they got me emergency leave and flew me home, she was already gone." Walker's voice cracked. "I never got to say goodbye either." The room had gone quiet. The video game paused. Every biker in the ironclad Brotherhood was listening to their president tell a story most of them had never heard. "Her mother, my wife Ellen, she couldn't forgive me for not being there. Said I chose the military over our daughter. Maybe she was right. The marriage ended 6 months after the funeral. I left the Air Force, drifted for a while, ended up in a bar in South Dakota picking a fight with the wrong guys." Walker smiled, but it was sad. "Turned out they were ironclad Brotherhood. Instead of beating my ass like I deserved, they offered me a patch. Gave me a family when I'd lost mine." "I'm sorry," Ethan said. "Me too, kid, every day." Walker looked at Ethan, really looked at him, and Ethan felt like he was being seen all the way down to his bones. "You remind me of her. Lily, same age, same courage, same stubborn refusal to give up. When you opened that door tonight, when you stood there with your baseball bat facing down 20 of the meanest-looking sons of bitches in Montana, all I could see was her. My little girl, brave as a lion, kind of summer rain." Ethan didn't know what to say, so he did what felt right. He leaned against Walker's side, and Walker's arm came around him, and they sat like that while the fire crackled and the storm raged outside. "Walker," Ethan asked after a while. "Yeah, kid. On the news before the power went out, they said there were people robbing houses during the blackout, using the storm as cover." Walker's arm tightened around Ethan's shoulders. "I heard that too. Do you think they're real or just something to scare people?" "They're real." Walker's voice had gone cold, the warmth leached out. "There are always predators who smell weakness and come running. Cowards who hide behind masks and weapons to terrorize families who can't fight back." "I was scared," Ethan admitted, "before you guys got here. I kept thinking about what I'd do if someone broke in. I had my dad's bat, but I'm just a kid. What could I really do?" "You're not just a kid, Ethan. You're a young man who made a choice tonight that most grown adults wouldn't have the stones to make. You saw people in trouble and helped them, even though you were scared, even though it was dangerous. That's not weakness. That's strength. I don't feel strong. Nobody ever does. Courage isn't the absence of fear, son. It's doing the right thing even when you're terrified. You did that tonight." Walker's voice dropped lower. "And you want to know something? You're not alone anymore. You've got 20 of the toughest, meanest, most loyal brothers in this state between you and any trouble. Nobody's getting through that door who shouldn't, I guarantee it. Garrett called out from where he was dominating at the racing game. Kids under Brotherhood protection. Now right, boss? Damn right he is, Walker said loudly enough for everyone to hear. As of tonight, Ethan Barrett is family. Anyone disagrees with that? 20 voices responded in unison. No, sir. Then it's settled. Walker looked down at Ethan. Welcome to the ironclad Brotherhood, little brother. You're one of us now. Ethan felt something break open in his chest, something that had been locked tight since the day his father died. Family. He had family again. But 15 miles away in a van parked on a side road, Vincent Maddox lowered his binoculars and smiled. Power's back on at the Barrett place, he said to the three men in the van with him. Kid must have fixed something. Smart little bastard. Marcus in the driver's seat shifted uncomfortably. Vince, maybe we pick a different house. Something about this doesn't feel right. It feels perfect, Vincent snapped. We've been watching the mom's schedule for 2 weeks. She's stuck at the hospital. The kid's alone. Easy pickings. In this storm, asked Malik from the back seat, we should wait it out, hit houses when the weather clears. The storm is exactly why we go tonight. No witnesses, no response time from cops, no way for the kid to call for help. We go in, persuade him to tell us where mommy keeps the valuables we're out in 10 minutes. By the time anyone finds out, we're 3 states away. Danny, the fourth member of their crew, peered through the snow at the distant lights of the Barrett farmhouse. What if he fights back? Vincent laughed, a sound like breaking glass. He's 12. What's he going to do? What Vincent didn't see were the motorcycles buried under snowdrifts near the front gate. What he didn't notice were the extra footprints already covered by fresh snowfall. What he couldn't know was that the Barrett house now contained not one vulnerable child, but 21 very capable men. Vincent Maddox thought he was hunting prey. He had no idea he was walking into a trap. Inside the house, the clock struck midnight. Ethan had dozed off on the couch wrapped in blankets, his baseball bat still clutched in one hand. Most of the bikers had spread out across the living room and hallway, sleeping on the floor with their cuts folded as pillows. But Walker wasn't sleeping. Neither was Garrett, who sat by the window like a massive gargoyle night vision binoculars in his hands. Boss, Garrett said quietly, we got company. Walker's eyes opened immediately. Where? Van on the access road about half a mile out. Been sitting there for 30 minutes. 4 occupants. They've been watching the house with binoculars. Walker was on his feet in an instant, moving to the window. He took the night vision optics and scanned the tree line. Sure enough, there was a van partially hidden behind a snowdrift, its occupants barely visible through the storm. Casing the place, Walker said. Waiting for lights out. Want me to wake the boys? Not yet. Let's see what they do. Walker's jaw clenched. But if they move on this house, if they come for this kid, they're going to learn a very painful lesson about what happens when you threaten the ironclad Brotherhood. They didn't have to wait long. At 1:47 in the morning, the van's doors opened. 4 figures emerged, bundled against the cold, carrying what looked like crowbars and flashlights. They were moving toward the house. Wake everyone, Walker ordered. Quiet. Don't wake Ethan yet. Garrett moved through the room like a ghost despite his size, touching shoulders, making hand signals. Within 60 seconds, all 20 bikers were awake and alert, years of military and street experience kicking in. Walker laid it out in a whisper. We've got 4 hostiles approaching. They think this is an easy target, a lone kid they can terrorize. They don't know we're here. We're going to let them get inside, let them show their intentions, then we're going to educate them on the error of their ways. Questions. Dakota grinned in the firelight. Do we have to be gentle? We're in a kid's house, Walker said sternly. We don't make a mess, we don't break his mother's furniture, and we don't traumatize him. But these guys want to hurt a child. His voice dropped to something cold and deadly. So no, Dakota, you don't have to be gentle. You just have to be smart. The bikers took positions throughout the house with military precision. Most faded into the shadows of the kitchen and hallway. A few stayed in the living room, lying down as if asleep. Walker settled into the darkest corner, invisible unless you knew where to look. The fire had burned down to embers, casting barely any light. To anyone entering it would look like a house full of sleeping people. They waited. At 2:13 in the morning, there was a sound at the back door. Metal on metal, Someone picking the lock. Walker's hands clenched into fists. He thought about Lily, about his little girl who'd never had the chance to grow up. He thought about every child who'd ever been hurt by men like these. He thought about what he'd do to anyone who tried to harm Ethan. The back door opened with barely a whisper. Footsteps entered the kitchen, trying to be quiet, failing. Four men spreading out flashlights, cutting through the darkness. Vincent Maddox stepped into the Barrett house crowbar, in hand smile on his face. He had no idea he just walked into the last mistake of his criminal career. Ethan woke to wrongness, not a sound exactly, more like the absence of right sounds. The fire crackling, yes. The wind howling, yes, but something else. Footsteps that didn't belong. Breathing that wasn't his own. The electric feeling of danger in the air. His eyes snapped open. Four men in his kitchen, visible through the doorway. Flashlight beams cutting through his house like knives. Voices low and cruel. Check the bedrooms. Grab anything valuable. What about the kid? Find him. Make him tell us where mommy keeps the good stuff. Terror flooded Ethan's veins, cold and sharp. His hand found the baseball bat, gripped it hard enough to hurt. He opened his mouth to scream. A massive hand covered his mouth gently. Garrett's voice was barely a breath in his ear. Shh, we got you. You're safe. Ethan's eyes adjusted to the darkness. The bikers weren't sleeping. They were coiled, ready positioned throughout his house, like landmines waiting to be triggered. Walker stood in the corner, nothing but a shape in the shadows, but Ethan could feel the violence radiating off him like heat. One of the intruders, a tall man with a crowbar, stepped into the living room. His flashlight beam swept across what he thought were sleeping forms on the floor. Walker's voice rang out calm and cold as a frozen lake. You boys lost. The flashlight beam swung wildly, trying to find the source of the voice. The man with the crowbar tried to sound tough and failed. Who's there? This is our house now. You better leave before... Before what? Walker stepped into a shaft of moonlight from the window. Even in the dim illumination, he was terrifying. 6'4" of scarred muscle and absolute confidence. Before you terrorize a child, break into his home, steal from his family. There's 4 of us, the man said, but his voice shook. And you're just one. Walker's smile was predatory. Count again. Garrett hit the light switch. The sudden illumination revealed the full picture. 20 bikers surrounded the 4 home invaders. They'd emerged from the shadows like vengeful spirits, forming a wall of leather and muscle and barely restrained violence. Vincent Maddox's crowbar hit the floor with a clatter. Marcus dropped his flashlight. Danny actually made a sound like a wounded animal. Only Malik had the presence of mind to raise his hands and surrender. Now then, Walker said conversationally, walking slowly toward the frozen invaders. Let me explain your situation. You broke into the home of our brother, our family. He gestured to Ethan, who sat wide-eyed on the couch. You came here planning to hurt a child, a brave, kind child who opened his door to strangers in a storm and saved their lives. We didn't know, Marcus started. You didn't know he had protection, Walker finished, but you knew he was alone. You knew he was vulnerable. You came anyway. That's what makes you predators. That's what makes you less than men. Dakota cracked his knuckles. We teaching lessons tonight, boss. We are indeed. Walker turned to Ethan. Son, you might want to go upstairs for a few minutes. This is going to get educational. Are you going to kill them? Ethan's voice was small, scared but steady. No, Walker said firmly, because we're not like them. We don't prey on the weak. We protect the weak. But we are going to make absolutely certain they understand the consequences of their choices. Ethan nodded slowly. Don't break Mom's furniture. She'll be really upset. Despite the tension, several bikers chuckled. Walker's expression softened. We'll be careful with your mother's things, son. I promise. Garrett ushered Ethan up the stairs. As he climbed, Ethan heard Walker's voice change, no longer conversational, but hard as iron. Gentlemen, class is now in session. What followed wasn't a fight. A fight implied 2 sides battling. This was education. The bikers didn't use weapons. They didn't need to. Years of bar brawls and street justice had taught them exactly how to subdue someone efficiently without causing permanent damage, but with maximum psychological impact. Vincent tried to run. Dakota's fist caught him in the solar plexus. He went down hard, gasping for air like a landed fish. Marcus actually tried to fight back, swinging wildly at Smoke, who simply stepped aside and swept the man's legs. Marcus hit the floor face first, blood streaming from his nose. Danny curled into a ball and started crying. The bikers left him there, contempt clear on their faces. Malik, perhaps the smartest of the four, kept his hands up. We're sorry. We'll leave. We'll never come back. Oh, you're definitely leaving, Walker said. But first, you're going to empty your pockets. Everything you stole tonight. Every piece of jewelry, every dollar, every prescription pill you took from frightened people during this storm. Put it all on the table. They did. Within minutes, a shocking amount of stolen property covered Ethan's kitchen table. Wedding rings, electronics, cash prescription bottles, watches, family heirlooms. Jesus, Smoke muttered. How many houses did you hit? 7, Malik admitted. 7 houses in 2 days. Walker's expression went dark. 7 families. 7 homes where people were scared and vulnerable, and you made it worse. You took what little security they had and left them with nothing but fear. We needed the money, Vincent wheezed from the floor. Everyone needs money, Dakota said coldly. Most people don't terrorize children to get it. Walker pulled out his phone. No signal, but he took photos anyway, documenting everything. When the storm breaks, this all goes back to the rightful owners. Dakota, you and Smoke start making a list. Description of each item, try to remember which house it came from based on what these fine gentlemen tell us. And if they don't remember, Dakota asked. Walker looked at Vincent with eyes like ice chips. Then we refresh their memory. I find pain helps with recollection. Vincent's eyes went wide. I'll remember everything, I swear. Upstairs, Ethan sat on his bed with Garrett listening to the sounds from below. Not violence, but the aftermath. The scrape of furniture, the low murmur of voices, the occasional yelp when someone moved wrong and discovered new bruises. Are they really okay down there? Ethan asked. They're fine, Garrett rumbled. Scared, hurting, but alive and intact. Walker runs a tight ship. We don't kill, we don't maim, we don't do permanent damage. But we do make sure people understand. He looked at Ethan seriously. Those men came here to hurt you. They might have done worse. They're getting off easy. I know, I've never seen violence before. Not real violence. This isn't violence, kid. This is justice. There's a difference. Garrett's massive hand settled on Ethan's shoulder. Violence is what they were planning to do to you. Justice is making sure they can't do it to anyone else. They sat in silence for a while. Then Ethan asked the question that had been burning in his mind. Garrett, why did Walker call me his brother? I just met you guys. Garrett smiled, the expression transforming his scarred face. Walker's daughter died when she was 10. Leukemia. He was deployed when it happened, never got to say goodbye. It broke something in him. Something that's never healed. He paused. When he looks at you, I think he sees what she could have been. The brave kid who doesn't give up, who helps people even when it's scary. You remind him of the good things in the world. The things worth protecting. He told me about her, about Lily. He did, Garrett looked surprised. He never talks about her, not even to us, and we're his brothers. He said I reminded him of her. Then you must be a pretty special kid. Walker doesn't give his trust easy, but when he does, it's forever. Garrett stood, his head nearly brushing the ceiling. Come on, let's go see if they're done educating those idiots. Downstairs, the 4 intruders sat against the wall, duct-taped at wrists and ankles, sporting various bruises and a healthy dose of terror. The stolen goods were cataloged and photographed. The bikers stood around like guards at a prison, making sure nobody tried anything stupid. Walker saw Ethan and waved him over. You okay, son? I'm okay. Are they? They'll live, unfortunately. Walker's expression softened. Ethan, I need you to understand something. What we did here tonight, it wasn't about revenge. It was about protection. These men were going to hurt you, and we stopped them. That's what family does. I know. Do you? Because you look a little shaken. Ethan thought about it. Was he shaken? Yes, scared a little. But underneath that was something else. Something warm and solid. I'm not shaken because I'm scared of you, Ethan said slowly. I'm shaken because I've never had anyone protect me like this. Not since Dad died. And it's overwhelming. Walker's eyes glistened. He pulled Ethan into a hug, and Ethan buried his face in the biker's leather cut and let himself be held. You've got us now, kid, Walker said quietly. For as long as you need us. Hell, for as long as you'll put up with us. The radio on Vincent's belt crackled to life. Vince, you guys in position. Vince, answer me. Walker plucked the radio from Vincent's belt. Vince is indisposed at the moment. Who's this? Silence. Then a voice careful and cold. Who the hell are you? I'm the guy who just caught 4 of your associates breaking into a child's home. The guy who's about to call the sheriff and have them arrested. The guy who's going to make sure you join them if you're stupid enough to show your face. More silence. Then, you have no idea who you're messing with. Enlighten me. My name is Marcus Maddox. Vincent is my brother. You heard him. You deal with me. Walker exchanged glances with his bikers. This just got more complicated. Your brother is fine, Marcus. Bruised but breathing. He's going to jail for a long time along with his friends. But he'll live. More than he deserves after what he planned. You think the cops are going to get there in time? You think I can't make problems for you? Marcus Maddox's voice dripped poison. I know who you are now. Saw the motorcycles on the security feed. Ironclad Brotherhood. You're a long way from home, Walker. Walker's expression went still. You know me. I know of you. Ex-military, dishonorably discharged, running with bikers now. And I know your precious Brotherhood has been moving product through Montana for the last 6 months. How would the DEA like to know about that? Dakota stepped forward, his face dark with anger. Boss, he's bluffing. Probably, Walker agreed, but even a bluff can cause problems. He raised the radio again. Marcus, let me make something crystal clear. You come after this kid, you come after this family, and you will regret it. The Brotherhood has 150 members across 5 states. Every single one of them will be looking for you. There's nowhere you can hide. Big words from a guy trapped in a farmhouse during a blizzard. The storm's clearing, dawns in 4 hours, and when the sun comes up, the sheriff is getting 4 gift-wrapped criminals and a full confession. You want to join them? You know where to find me. Walker clicked off the radio and threw it across the room. We got a problem, he said to his bikers. Marcus Maddox is a player, not just some punk criminal. He's connected, organized, and apparently he's been watching us. How do we handle it? Smoke asked. We protect the kid. That's priority 1. Everything else is secondary. Walker looked at the 4 bound men. Gentlemen, you are going to tell me everything you know about Marcus Maddox, where he operates, who he works with, what he's planning, and you're going to do it right now. Vincent, his face still pale with pain, nodded frantically. He's my half-brother. He runs a smuggling operation, drugs mostly, but he'll move anything for the right price. He's been expanding into Montana, trying to muscle in on territory. How many people does he have? At least a dozen regulars, more if he calls in favors. Walker did the math. 20 bikers versus potentially 15 criminals. The numbers weren't great, especially with Ethan to protect. We need to fortify, Dakota said, reading Walker's mind. Turn this place into a fortress. Already on it, Garrett said. He'd been scanning the house, his military training evident. Kitchen has good sight lines. Living room can be blocked off. Upstairs is defensible. We can hold this place. Against an assault, Walker asked. Against anything short of a tank. Ethan, who'd been listening to all this with growing alarm, spoke up. You don't have to stay. You can leave and go somewhere safe. I'll be okay. Every biker in the room turned to look at him. Walker knelt down until he was eye level with the boy. Ethan, listen to me. We don't abandon family. Not when they're in danger, not when things get hard, not ever. You opened your door to us when we were dying in the snow. You saved our lives. Now we save yours. That's how this works. But you could get hurt. You could die, Walker smiled. Son, I've been dying since the day my daughter left this world. You know what tonight did? It reminded me what it feels like to be alive, to have someone worth protecting. I'm not walking away from that. None of us are. Damn right, Garrett rumbled. The other bikers echoed him. Damn right. Not a chance. We're staying. Ethan felt tears streak down his face. Thank you. Don't thank us yet, Walker said. This might get rough. They spent the next 2 hours preparing. Furniture became barricades. Kitchen knives became weapons. The bikers who'd been special forces or Marines fell back into combat mode, setting up fields of fire, identifying choke points, creating fallback positions. Ethan watched them work with a mixture of awe and fear. These men, these dangerous, scary men, were transforming his home into a fortress. For him. At 4:17 in the morning, headlights appeared on the access road. "Company?" Garrett called from his position by the window. Walker moved beside him, binoculars in hand. "I count 3 vehicles. Vans probably holding 4 to 5 each. Call it 15 hostiles." "We're outnumbered," Dakota observed. "We're always outnumbered," Walker said with a grim smile. "But we've got position preparation and righteous anger. That counts for a lot." The vehicles stopped at the edge of the property line just out of clear sight. A figure emerged from the lead van holding a bullhorn. "Walker, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Send out my brother and his crew, and we leave, nobody gets hurt." Walker opened a window and shouted back, "Your brother and his crew are going to jail. You want them, you go through us. Your funeral." The figure retreated to the van. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the van's doors opened and armed men poured out. "Here we go," Walker said quietly. He turned to Ethan, who stood behind the barricade they'd built. "Stay low, stay quiet, and no matter what happens, trust us. Can you do that?" Ethan nodded, too scared to speak. "Good boy." Walker turned to his bikers. "Remember, brothers, we don't kill unless we have no choice. But we don't back down either. This is our line in the sand. Nobody crosses it." 20 voices answered as one. Nobody crosses it. The first shot shattered the kitchen window, spraying glass across the tile floor. Ethan dove behind the overturned couch that now served as a barricade, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. This was real. This was actually happening. People were trying to hurt him, and the only thing standing between him and them were 20 bikers who hours ago had been complete strangers. Walker didn't flinch. He stood in the shadows beside the broken window, tracking movement outside with the calm of a man who'd seen combat before. Real combat, not this small-town criminal nonsense. "Suppressive fire," he said calmly. "Don't hit anybody if you can help it. Just convince them this is a bad idea." 3 bikers had guns. Only 3. The rest had improvised weapons tools from Michael Barrett's garage kitchen, knives lengths of pipe. Against 15 armed criminals, it should have been suicide. Should have been. Dakota fired twice through the window, aiming high, the shots designed to scare rather than kill. Outside, someone screamed and dove for cover. The advancing line of attackers broke, scattering behind the vehicles. "They're not professionals," Smoke observed from his position by the front door. "Look at them. No tactics, no discipline, just thugs with guns." "Thugs with guns can still kill you," Walker reminded him. "Stay sharp." Marcus Maddox's voice came through the bullhorn again, but now it was tinged with frustration. "You're just making this harder on yourselves. We've got you surrounded. You can't win." Walker grabbed Vincent, who was still duct-taped to a chair, and hauled him to the window. "Tell your brother to back off or you're going to have a really bad morning." Vincent's eyes were wide with terror. Marcus, they're serious. They'll kill me." "No, we won't," Walker said quietly, "but he doesn't need to know that." There was a long pause. Then Marcus's voice, cold and calculating. "Vincent always was the weak one. Do what you want with him." Vincent's face went pale. "He's bluffing. He has to be." "Doesn't sound like it," Dakota said cheerfully. "Sounds like your brother just wrote you off." Outside, the criminals regrouped. They'd brought rope and what looked like Molotov cocktails. Not professionals, but dangerous amateurs who'd watched too many action movies. "They're going to try to burn us out," Garrett observed. "Let them try," Walker said. "This house is built like a brick fortress. It survived 70 years of Montana winters. It can survive a few bottles of gas." But Ethan knew something the bikers didn't. "The propane tank," he said suddenly, "for the stove and the backup heating. It's on the north side of the house." Walker's expression changed. "How big are 500 gallons? "Damn." Walker keyed his radio. "All units priority 1, protect the north wall. They hit that propane tank, we're all going up." The bikers shifted positions. 4 of them moved to the north-facing windows, weapons ready. If Marcus's crew was smart enough to figure out the tank's location, this could get very bad very fast. They weren't smart enough. Instead, they tried the direct approach. 6 men rushed the front door, thinking they could overwhelm the defenders with speed and numbers. What they actually did was funnel themselves into a kill zone that former Marine Sergeant Garrett Hayes had designed specifically for this purpose. The door exploded inward under the impact of a battering ram. The 6 attackers poured through screaming war cries, waving guns and bats. They made it exactly 3 steps before they realized their mistake. The living room floor was covered in cooking oil from Ethan's kitchen. The first man hit it and went down like he'd been shot, sliding into the overturned furniture barricade with a bone-jarring impact. The second and third tripped over the first. The fourth managed to keep his feet, but then caught Garrett's fist in his face and went down like a falling tree. The fifth and sixth tried to retreat, but found the doorway blocked by their fallen comrades. Dakota and Smoke grabbed them, hauled them inside, and had them duct-taped in under 15 seconds. "Amateur hour," Smoke muttered, shaking his head. Outside, Marcus Maddox was learning a hard lesson. Numbers don't mean much when you're tactically incompetent. His men were scared, scattered, and rapidly losing faith in their boss's plan. Walker saw the doubt spreading through their ranks. He grabbed the bullhorn. "Marcus, you're done. Half your crew is already captured. The rest are about to join them. Walk away now and we don't hunt you down later." "I'm not going anywhere," Marcus shouted back, but his voice cracked with desperation. "You think you can threaten me? I run this territory. I've got connections, resources. And we've got righteousness," Walker replied. "Guess which one wins?" The standoff stretched. Minutes ticked by. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east dawn approaching. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a world of pristine white snow and crystalline air, and the sound of sirens. Sheriff Tom Rodriguez and 6 deputies came up the access road in a convoy of 4-wheel-drive trucks, their lights painting the snow red and blue. Behind them, incredibly, was a caravan of civilian vehicles. Trucks with snowplows, SUVs full of neighbors. The whole damn town, it looked like. Grace Barrett's car was in the lead. "Ethan," she screamed, throwing open the door before the car had fully stopped. "Ethan. Mom." Ethan bolted from behind the barricade, racing for the door. Garrett tried to grab him, but the kid was fast and motivated. He hit the front porch at full speed just as Grace reached the steps. The reunion was a collision of arms and tears and incoherent words. Grace held her son like she'd never let go, checking him for injuries, kissing his head, laughing and crying at the same time. "I'm okay, Mom," Ethan kept saying. "I'm okay. The Brotherhood protected me." Sheriff Rodriguez assessed the scene with the weary eyes of a man who'd seen too much in too few years. 6 criminals duct-taped and groaning in the living room. 4 more in custody outside. Marcus Maddox and his remaining crew trying to decide if they should fight or flee. The decision was made for them when 20 more motorcycles roared up the access road. These weren't from the original group. These were reinforcements called in by Walker during the night. Members of the ironclad Brotherhood from chapters in Wyoming, Idaho, North Dakota. Brothers who'd ridden through the tail end of the blizzard because one of their own had called for help. Now Marcus Maddox faced not 20 bikers, but 40, plus the sheriff and 6 armed deputies, plus half the town of Whitefish, Montana, who'd heard about the siege and come to help. He was surrounded, outgunned, and out of options. "Marcus Maddox," Rodriguez's voice boomed through the bullhorn. "This is Sheriff Tom Rodriguez. You are surrounded. Throw down your weapons and come out with your hands up. This is your only warning." Marcus stood in the snow, looking at the army arrayed against him, looking at the burning wreckage of his operation, looking at his brother, Vincent, being led out in cuffs. He dropped his gun. Within 10 minutes, all 15 members of Marcus's crew were in custody. Rodriguez's deputies were busy reading rights, taking statements, documenting the stolen property that the bikers had cataloged. Grace Barrett stood in her living room looking at the damage, the overturned furniture, the broken windows, the oil-slicked floor. Then she looked at her son, alive and safe, standing next to Walker. "You're Walker," she said. Not a question. "Yes, ma'am. Ethan told me what you did, what all of you did." Her voice shook. "You protected my son. He saved us first, ma'am. He opened his door when he had every reason to keep it locked. He's a remarkable young man. You should be proud." "I am." Grace looked at Walker, really looked at him, and Ethan saw recognition dawn in her eyes. "You look familiar. Have we met?" Walker's expression flickered. "I don't think so, ma'am." But something in his voice made Ethan wonder. Made him look between his mother and Walker and see what similarities in their eyes, the way they both stood, shoulders back, ready for anything. Grace stepped closer. What's your full name? Walker, just Walker. Your real name. The room had gone quiet. Every biker, every deputy, every neighbor who'd crowded into the house, they all watched this exchange. Walker looked at Grace for a long moment. Then he sighed. Captain Dean Walker, United States Air Force, retired, dishonorably discharged. Grace's hand flew to her mouth. Dean Walker. You know him, Mom? Ethan asked, confused. Grace's eyes filled with tears. Your father served with him in Afghanistan. Michael never talked about it much, but he mentioned Dean Walker. Said he was the bravest man he'd ever known. Said he'd saved his life during an ambush. Walker's face had gone pale. Michael Barrett. You knew my dad, Ethan's voice rose. You knew him, and you didn't say anything. I didn't know, Walker said hoarsely. I lost track of him after I left the service. I didn't know he'd passed. I didn't know he had a son. He looked at Ethan with something like wonder. I didn't know he'd raised a boy just like him. Brave and smart and kind. The pieces fell into place. Why Walker had been so protective. Why he'd seen something in Ethan worth saving. It wasn't just because Ethan reminded him of Lily. It was because Ethan was the son of the man who'd saved Walker's life 15 years ago. The ambush, Grace said quietly. Michael never gave me details, but I know he pulled someone from a burning vehicle. Was that you? Walker nodded. We were hit by an IED. The Humvee rolled. I was trapped. Fuel was everywhere, the whole thing about to blow. Michael ran into the fire and dragged me out. Saved my life. I tried to stay in touch after my discharge, but I was dealing with a lot of things. My daughter dying, my marriage falling apart. I lost contact with everyone from my old life. He would have wanted you here, Grace said. He always said you were a good man, a man of honor. I haven't been that man in a long time, ma'am. You were that man last night, Ethan said firmly. You protected me. You kept me safe. That's exactly what Dad would have done. Walker's eyes were wet. Your father was my brother Ethan. We went through hell together. And I failed him. I wasn't there when he needed me. I didn't even know he'd died. But you're here now, Ethan said. You were here when I needed you. Dad would have called that even. Walker pulled Ethan into a hug, and this time when he held the boy, there was a weight of history to it. A debt paid forward. A promise kept across time and death. Grace joined the embrace, and for a moment they stood like that. A family united by loss and chance, and the stubborn refusal of good people to abandon each other. Sheriff Rodriguez cleared his throat. Walker, I'm going to need statements from everyone. This is going to take hours. We'll give you whatever you need, Walker said. And for the record, Rodriguez added, Vincent Maddox and his crew are looking at home invasion, assault theft, and about a dozen other charges. They're going away for a long time. Marcus, too, plus weapons charges and leading a criminal enterprise. He smiled. You boys did good work here. Civilian arrest properly executed, minimal force used. I'm actually impressed. We protect our own, Walker said simply. The cleanup took the rest of the day. The neighbors helped board up the broken windows. The bikers repaired the door, cleaned up the oil, put the furniture back. By sunset, the Barrett house looked almost normal again. Almost. Grace made a decision that surprised everyone. You're all staying for dinner. Ma'am, we couldn't, Walker started. You saved my son. You're staying for dinner. All of you, I'll order enough pizza to feed an army. They stayed. 40 bikers crammed into the Barrett house eating pizza and telling stories. Ethan sat in the middle of it all, watching these rough, dangerous men laugh and joke and act like the family they claimed to be. At one point, Grace pulled Walker aside. What are your plans after tonight? Head home, South Dakota, back to the clubhouse. And then what? Walker shrugged. Same as always. Ride work, try to stay out of trouble. What if you stayed here? Walker looked at her sharply. Ma'am, Whitefish could use a good mechanic. The garage on Main Street is hiring. Owner's a friend of mine. Grace's expression was serious. And Ethan could use someone, a mentor, someone who knew his father. I'm not a role model, Mrs. Barrett. Grace, and yes, you are. You just proved it. She gestured to the bikers filling her house. These men follow you. They trust you. Ethan trusts you. That's not nothing. Walker was quiet for a long moment. Then, can I think about it? Take all the time you need. But Ethan, who'd been eavesdropping, wasn't willing to wait. He walked over and looked up at Walker with serious eyes. If you leave, are you coming back? I would, yeah, kid. I'd come back to visit. Promise, Walker knelt down. I promise, Ethan. You're family now. That's forever. Then stay, please. I don't want to wait for visits. I want you here. The room had gone quiet again. 40 bikers watched their president, waiting to see what he'd say. Walker looked at this boy, this brave, impossible boy, who reminded him of his daughter and his best friend and every good thing he'd thought he'd lost. He looked at Grace, who was offering him a second chance at a normal life. He looked at his brothers, who'd follow him anywhere but who might also understand if he chose a different path. I'll stay, he said quietly, if you'll have me. Ethan threw his arms around Walker's neck, and the room erupted in cheers. 2 months later, spring came to Montana. The snow melted, revealing a world washed clean. Flowers bloomed in the meadow behind the Barrett house. The creek that ran through the property swelled with runoff, singing its ancient song. Walker had kept his promise. He'd taken the job at the garage, moving into a small apartment above the shop. He came to dinner at the Barrett's house 3 times a week, teaching Ethan about cars and motorcycles and all the things a father should teach a son. The ironclad Brotherhood visited regularly, 20 men on motorcycles roaring up the access road to check on their little brother. They'd installed a state-of-the-art security system, top of the line, with cameras and motion sensors and a direct line to the sheriff's office. Nobody was sneaking up on the Barrett house again. Ethan's 13th birthday party was a biker rally. 40 members of the Brotherhood showed up along with half the town, and they celebrated in the meadow with barbecue and music and laughter that carried across the valley. Grace watched from the porch, marveling at how much had changed in just 2 months. Her son, who'd been so lost after his father's death, had found his smile again, had found a new family, had found Walker, who looked at the boy with such pride and affection that it made Grace's heart ache. She didn't mean to fall in love with Dean Walker. It happened slowly, like spring melting winter. Small moments of connection. His hand on her back as they cooked dinner. His laugh at one of her jokes. The way he listened, really listened, when she talked about her work at the hospital. One evening in May, as they sat on the porch watching Ethan play with the other kids in the yard, Walker took her hand. Grace, he started, then stopped. Tried again. I know I'm not the easiest man. I've got baggage scars, a past that would scare most people away. But you don't scare easily. You proved that by marrying an aerospace engineer and raising a son who invites bikers in from blizzards. He turned to face her. I'm falling for you. Have been since the day I met you. And I know it's complicated, and I know it might be too soon, but I need you to know. Grace smiled. It's not too soon, and I'm falling too. They kissed as the sun set, and Ethan, watching from the yard, grinned and high-fived Garrett. A year after the blizzard, Dean Walker asked Grace Barrett to marry him. He did it right. Asked Ethan first if he'd be okay with it, if he'd accept Walker as a stepfather. Ethan's response was to throw his arms around Walker and say, "Took you long enough." The wedding was in the meadow with 100 bikers and half of Whitefish in attendance. Sheriff Rodriguez officiated, grinning as he pronounced them husband and wife. The Brotherhood formed an honor guard, their motorcycles lined up like a parade of chrome and steel. Ethan stood between his mother and his new stepfather, looking out at the sea of leather-clad faces, and felt something settle in his chest. This was family, not the family he'd been born into, though his father's memory was woven through every moment, but the family he'd chosen, the family that had chosen him back. Walker's speech at the reception made grown men cry. 13 months ago, I was lost. I'd lost my daughter, my marriage, my military career, everything that defined me. I was riding through a blizzard, literally and metaphorically, with no idea where I was going or why. He looked at Ethan. And then this kid, this impossibly brave kid, opened his door and invited death itself in from the cold. Except we weren't death. We were just broken men looking for redemption. He turned to Grace. You gave me a second chance at life, at family, at being the man I should have been all along. Your husband, Michael, saved my life in Afghanistan, but you and Ethan, you saved my soul. There wasn't a dry eye in the meadow. The years that followed were good ones. Ethan grew into a young man his father would have been proud of. Smart, kind, brave, with a mechanical aptitude that made him a natural at the garage where Walker worked. On his 16th birthday, the Brotherhood gifted him a motorcycle of his own, a restored 1969 Harley that Walker had spent months rebuilding. "You're not joining the club," Walker said firmly as Ethan stared at the bike in wonder. "You're going to college like your dad wanted, but you're always our brother. That doesn't require a patch." Grace's medical career flourished. She became head of the ER at County General, saving more lives than she could count. She never forgot the night of the blizzard when she'd driven through the storm, not knowing if her son was alive or dead. It made her cherish every moment with her family. Walker found peace in the simple rhythms of family life. Dinner every night at 6, helping Ethan with homework, date nights with Grace, Sunday morning pancakes. He still rode with the Brotherhood, still wore his cut with pride, but his priorities had shifted. Home was no longer just a word. It was a place, a feeling, a promise he intended to keep. On the 10th anniversary of the blizzard, the Barrett Walker family gathered in the meadow with the entire ironclad Brotherhood. 200 bikers from 10 states came to celebrate, to remember, to honor the night that changed everything. Ethan, now 22 and fresh out of college with an engineering degree, like his father, stood before the crowd and told the story of that night. How a 12-year-old boy had made a choice that saved 20 lives. How 20 strangers had become family. How a debt of honor had been paid forward across generations. "My father taught me that we help people when they need it," Ethan said, his voice carrying across the meadow. "That's what separates us from animals. We have the capacity for compassion, and that capacity demands action. The night of the blizzard, I acted. I opened the door, and everything changed." He looked at Walker, who stood with Grace, both of them gray-haired now, but still strong, still together. "Walker, you've been more than a stepfather to me. You've been a mentor, a friend, a second father. You taught me what it means to be a man of honor, to protect the weak, to stand up for what's right, to choose family always." Walker's eyes were wet. "You taught me too, kid. You taught me that it's never too late to be redeemed. That family isn't just blood, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is open your door to a storm." The party lasted until dawn. 200 bikers and 300 civilians, all celebrating the power of human connection, the power of choosing compassion over fear, the power of family chosen and earned and cherished. As the sun rose over the Montana mountains, Ethan stood in the meadow where he'd played as a child, where his mother had married Walker, where the Brotherhood had gathered year after year. He thought about his father, buried on the hill overlooking this land. He thought about Lily Walker, who he'd never met, but who'd shaped his life in unexpected ways. He thought about the blizzard, the bikers, the moment that changed everything. And he thought about the lesson he'd carry forward, that we are defined not by the families we're born into, but by the families we build, by the doors we choose to open, by the people we choose to protect. The Ironclad Brotherhood's motto was emblazoned on every cut: loyal to the end. But Ethan knew the real motto, the one that mattered most: family first, always. He looked at the sign at the edge of the property, installed years ago, visible from the road. "Protected by the Ironclad Brotherhood. MC trespassers will be educated." And below it added more recently, "Home of the Barrett Walker family, where strangers become brothers and love is always worth the risk." Ethan smiled. His father would have approved. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and possibility across the meadow. Somewhere a motorcycle engine roared to life. Somewhere a family gathered around a table. Somewhere a door opened to let in the cold, and with it, redemption. The blizzard had passed years ago, but its legacy remained written in the hearts of everyone who'd been there that night, written in the family that had been forged from snow and fear, and the stubborn refusal of good people to abandon each other. Walker walked over and put his arm around Ethan's shoulders. "You okay, son?" "Yeah, Dad, I'm perfect." And he was.